Tammy Lee. I'm the Deputy Director here at the Hawaii Department of Transportation. I just want to welcome everybody for taking the time out of their busy schedules to join us this evening. This is one of a few, I guess, virtual meetings that we're having to kind of collect community input on our draft energy security and waste reduction plan. So DOT leadership is on the call. Joining me today is Laura Kaakua. She is our energy security officer, as well as Deputy Directors Kurt Otaguro at airports, Dre Kalili from our harbors modality, and Robin Shishido from highways. Next slide. So this is just a little roadmap of what we're going to be talking about today. So first, we're going to talk about our draft energy security foundational pillars, some background of how we got to where we are today with our draft plan, as well as emission reduction strategies from each of our modalities. And again, this is to get as much community input to kind of advise our final plan. So again, I thank you for joining us this evening. Next slide. These are our foundational pillars of our draft energy security and waste reduction plan. Included are emissions reduction, energy security, and affordability. All three are important foundations together in developing our plan strategies. Of course, the future is to decrease our dependence on imported energy and food and produce our own local industry. We're prepared to move forward with emission reduction strategies that we're going to talk about this evening, where we have estimates on cost, such as constructing additional shared use paths, installing public electric vehicle chargers, and using renewable diesel in our medium and heavy duty fleets. For sure, we may conduct future studies on the areas where the economic impacts of the suggested emission reduction strategies are unknown on businesses and consumers. Of course, the science is evolving and we're not done after issuing the plan. It's not one of those one and we're done, but we are going to be updating our analyses as economic data and available technologies change in the future. So now I'd like to turn it over to our Energy Security and Community Outreach Manager, Laura Kaakua. Laura?
Thanks, Tammy. Next slide. So we want to start off with acknowledging that the work doesn't start with us, that it's been going on for a long time, many years, both by HDOT and by many private and public partners to reduce emissions throughout the transportation sector. And as a result of all of that work and dedication, Hawaii is a leader in EV adoption and in rooftop solar. And we've had really exciting new ventures and technologies that are about to come online. And next slide, please. Even with all of that good work, we still face a situation where transportation emissions amount to almost half of Hawaii's emissions. And actually a more recent study shows that number at above half. And so we don't want to stop at what's been done. We want to continue moving that needle down towards our state climate and emissions reduction goals. Next slide. Many of you are familiar with the settlement agreement in the Navahine case. This historic settlement agreement formalizes Hawaii Department of Transportation's commitment to electrify and decarbonize transportation and to work in a dedicated manner to meet our state climate targets. The settlement agreement also acknowledges that Hawaii Department of Transportation cannot do it alone. We need private sector partners, the legislature, sister agencies at the state and county and federal levels, and really everyone in the public in order to meet the state's most ambitious emissions reduction goals. Next slide. The Navahine settlement does require the Department of Transportation to develop a comprehensive statewide plan to reduce emissions from Hawaii's transportation sector that is on a timeline in compliance with existing state law. And so there's our state law, Hawaii Revised Statutes 225P5, which applies to all sectors and creates a state emissions reduction target by 2030 to reduce emissions levels by 50% from 2005 levels of emissions, and also to reach net negative emissions by 2045, meaning that Hawaii would capture more carbon than we emit by that time. And there are other existing state laws, such as managing a clean fleet and a goal to eventually reach zero emissions in transportation that the settlement agreement requires be included in our energy security and waste reduction plan. Next slide. And so we started this effort last year, and we have published our draft plan at the end of June. And we have the public comment period open through the end of this month. So we really appreciate you all being here and participating. And we will integrate those comments and publish a final plan by October 15th. And as Tammy referenced, this is an ongoing working plan. So we have made a commitment to revise annually for the first 5 years, because we know there's a lot of work to be done and a lot more specifics that we'll be adding into the plan as the time goes on, including an economic analysis and an equity analysis, as well as annual work plans to reach our ambitious targets. Next slide. This slide here summarizes the impact of new strategies. So the line at the top that is in orange shows the predicted status quo emissions. So because of all of the good work that we referenced earlier, we're not seeing a prediction of increased transportation emissions. At the same time, we're not predicting that if we keep with the status quo that we will hit the 2030 and 2045 state reduction targets as set in law. And so we want to continue the good work existing and also add on new strategies to reach those targets. And those strategies for all modes of transportation are combined here. In green, it shows the expected impact from adopting clean fuel strategies. That's the greatest wedge here, primarily due to sustainable aviation fuel and the current impact of regular aviation fuel. The blue wedge is electrification. The pink is fuel demand reduction strategies, including multimodal. And we still have a gap in those reductions down to the stars, which are the state climate targets. And so we're filling that gap with carbon removals from proven sequestration techniques such as native reforestation. Next slide. There are some priority actions across all modes that will enable the strategies that we will talk about tonight. And those priority actions are to implement the right legislative low carbon fuel framework for Hawaii, to increase electric vehicles and equipment through infrastructure, through incentives, and also public education, to invest immediately in carbon removals, such as native reforestation, and to integrate decarbonization goals early in our project planning and funding prioritization. And now I'll turn it over to Deputy Director for Highways, Robin Shishido. Next slide.
Hi, thanks, Laura. Good evening, everybody. Again, Robin Shishido with DOT Highways. So tonight I'll talk about our top 3 strategies identified for ground transportation in order to meet the targets that Laura mentioned earlier. So this includes increase the use of electric vehicles statewide, expand transportation choices, and use low carbon fuels for heavy duty trucks. Next slide. So for electrification, we have some benchmarks identified. The first is in 2030, which has all new light duty vehicle sales, or 81% of light duty vehicle sales being battery electric vehicles. In 2035 is to have all state and county light duty vehicles transition to zero emission vehicles, and then in 2035 to have 100% of new light duty vehicle sales be battery electric vehicles. In order to meet these benchmarks, we have several strategies identified. The first, of course, is building out the charging infrastructure. Other strategies include having some incentives for folks to purchase EVs. Also, incentive programs to have people turn over their ICE vehicles to EVs, and also discussing with transportation network companies such as the Uber, the Lyft, and the Holo Holo, and the car rental agencies to convert their fleets also to electric vehicles. But again, some of these, it'll take different legislation to be enacted, some of these incentive programs or even reduction in EV registration. And it's something, we'll push forward as we go through this effort. Next slide, please. For the charging infrastructure, so in the last transportation bill, U.S. transportation bill, there was money that was given to states to build out the charging network, and this is to provide fast chargers across the state. So for here in Hawaii, we already have 2 sites open, one on Maui and one on Oahu, and we're currently in different stages of the next 9 sites, which are gonna include another one on Maui, 1 more on Oahu, 2 on Kauai, and 5 on Hawaii Island. But even with the charging stations we're putting out, we're also going to need help from the private sector to go and build out the network that can provide a good charging network for everybody here in Hawaii. Next slide, please. The next strategy is vehicle miles travel reduction, and different benchmarks again. In 2030, a 5% reduction, 2035, a 10% reduction, 2040, 15% reduction, and 2045, a 20% reduction. And when we talk about reduction in vehicle miles traveled, we're not telling everybody to get out of your car and stop driving, but rather, we're looking at different modes of transportation we can provide. So as part of the settlement agreement, over the next 5 years, we are to complete the bicycle and pedestrian network throughout the state. And, we're working on that, and I'll get a little more details in the next slide. But also to, help reduce the vehicle miles traveled, also look at expanding the transit network, and also looking at, maybe some incentives or strategies on how even our employers can incentivize their employees to use public transit. And also looking at, again, different things that might require legislation, such as congestion pricing and revising parking standards. Next slide, please. So for the 5-year priority of multimodal networks, our state planning branch met with all the counties and looked at their bicycle and pedestrian network and overlaid it with ours and identified the gaps. And over the next 5 years, we're going to invest anywhere between 40 to 60 million per year in order to build these projects and have a contiguous network here over the next 5 years. Next slide, please. Our last strategy for ground transportation is clean fuels. And again, we have 2 benchmarks identified. In 2030, have a 2 to 4% increase in clean freight vehicles using clean fuels. And then in 2045, 100% of clean freight vehicles. And the strategies identified is, just ensuring that the infrastructure is in place for both the public and industry, be able to have access to these clean fuels. Again, having HDOT convert our fleet to EVs, alternative fuels, by the end of 2026, and then also for other county agencies. Next slide. So kind of a snapshot of, what this will look like. In 2030, the clean fuels would be biodiesel, renewable diesel, and ethanol. And in 2030, estimated demands for each one. And then in 2045, with renewable diesel really becoming a big part of this strategy. And just applicable sectors on, who would be able to use these clean fuels to help us get to our targets. And with that, I'll turn it over to our Deputy Director for Harbor to talk about maritime strategies.
Thank you, Robin. For the maritime sector, we considered basically two segments that we needed to develop strategies for. One was cruise ship activity, and the other portion of their strategies target our cargo operations. And we did this because, you know, we cannot exist without the cargo operations. We rely so heavily on imported goods, and 91% of the goods that we need to import come in through our seaports. So, I mean, that was one reason that we kind of thought in these two buckets of strategies. And as you can see on the screen, the four strategies that we have are one, reducing cruise ship activity, and then for the cargo side, an adoption of renewable and biodiesel for inter-island marine vessels. So these are generally the tug and barge operations that bring cargo from Honolulu Harbor to our neighbor island ports. And then for interstate marine activity, and those are the large shipping vessels that carry cargo from generally our West Coast ports into Hawaii. You know, trying to target the reduction of emissions through adoption of LNG. And we're already starting to see some of those cargo ships adopting this new fuel. And then for the craft that need to remain in the ports, and those are generally assist tugs, pilot vessels. So they're not traveling between ports, but they're generally staying within a set port. Looking at how we can transition the craft to low carbon and zero emission fuels, understanding that because they don't travel out of the market, right, it will largely depend on either what we can create in state or import. Next slide, please. And then, so looking at these benchmarks, these are what we, this is for the cruise operation. Our target here is to reduce the fuel demand and the emissions related thereto. And so we have identified over the next 5, 10, and 15 years, benchmarks for reduction of cruise calls. And this is an area that I want to be very clear about. These reductions are for vessels that still burn and emit greenhouse gases. So burn fossil fuels and emit greenhouse gases. So should vessels, cruise vessels that is, convert to LNG or have some other technology where there are no emissions, these reductions would not apply to those vessels. And I think it is important to call out that there is an exemption for home ported cruise ships. We have one currently, but I think the importance for that is to ensure that we do have a cruise footprint in our state, and that some of the support services that rely on the cruise industry still have business. Next slide, please. So for our cargo operations, our strategies are fully oriented around the adoption of clean fuels. And here are the benchmarks. You saw when Robin was presenting on the ground transportation and some of the clean fuel adoption timelines, some additional data there. But here, this is basically what we project over the next, again, 5, 10, and 15 years for each different type of vessel and each different type of clean fuel. Next slide, please. And with that, I will turn it over to our Deputy Director, Wasaguro, who can go over the aviation segment. Thank you.
Hi, thanks, Dre, and good evening, everyone. Kurt Wasaguro, Deputy Director for Airports. This evening, we're going to be covering 3 strategies for the aviation industry. It's the use of sustainable aviation fuel, or SAF, as we call it. The second strategy is electrification of airfield, ground, and terminal access. And the third would be our ramp efficiency, which is the air side of our airport, and how we have an optimization plan for that. So for on the next slide, we have clean fuels. And so sustainable aviation fuel, or SAF, is a lower carbon alternative for aviation fuel compared to the conventional jet fuels that are produced today, made from non-fossil fuel sources. So the main challenge that we see with SAF is really the production cost. as well as the supply in the short term. Today, we estimate that it could be as much as 3 to 5 times more expensive today. So nevertheless, we need legislative and regulatory support to expand the use of SAF through things like tax credits, other incentives for investments and things of that nature. What you see on this slide is 2 scenarios. The one on the left is the Hawaii law, which shows a net negative emission by 2045. The column to the right is a national SAF challenge, which has the same targets but achievable by 2050. The industry needs tax credits for SAF production to offset the initial cost to produce that fuel. So what we plan to do is work with the local SAF coalition here to build a diverse coalition that can address multiple issues, multiple areas to determine approaches for benchmarking production. We can also look at enacting legislation and to measure and achieve those benchmarks. We also need to establish clean fuel standards. And obviously, over time, find a way to build more supply and distribution for clean fuels here in Hawaii. Continued research for longer-term alternative fuels, things like hydrogen and eSAF. On the next slide, we highlight some of our electrification strategies. And so what we see is by 2035, we're targeting to work with our car rental agencies and encourage a 50% conversion of EV vehicles. By 2045, we want to convert all of our airport ground support equipment, or what we refer to it as GSE equipment at the airports, all of that to EV. We'll continue to support research and development for electric aircraft, continue to work on electrifying the ground service equipment at airports to power the planes. So when the planes sit at the gates, instead of burning fuel, they'd be plugged into electric power supplies. We'll continue the expansion and conversion of our lighting on the runways and taxiways to LED, convert mobile equipment to EVs, look at our and continue to access our EV charging infrastructure throughout the airport. We'll continue to explore rideshare and taxi partnerships, as well as create partnerships with our current car rental agencies. On the last slide for aviation, we have ramp efficiency. And so ramp is the air side of an airport, I should say. We have terminal and air side. So ramp efficiency is really looking at, the fuel demand reductions. And so in 2045, we're looking to reduce idling fuel flow. So planes sitting on the tarmac by about 18% through airport ramp side of the airfield. We are working with the FAA to modernize Hawaii airspace, something that hasn't been done in quite some time, and working with the federal government and FAA to deploy new technologies like performance-based navigation, PBNs to help reduce congestion in the airspace. We want to optimize aircraft movements on the taxiway and ramps to prevent those congestion and delays. Look at other on-site renewable power supplies, and of course, work with our myriad of tenants and concessionaires within the airport to adopt and comply with our emission reduction policies. With that, I would like to turn over the presentation back to Tammy Lee, who will present our administrative strategies.
Thank you, Deputy Director Otaguro. Again, Tammy Lee, Deputy Director for the administration. So for the administrative reduction strategies, some of the benchmarks, we'll be working with the legislature coming next session on some energy security bills. We're also going to be working on the development of a clean fuel standard or an alternative framework to reduce emissions, which I will be speaking to you in future slides. So below that in purple, policy and implementation strategies. Internally, we've developed an impact tool that will estimate the short and long-term emissions that are associated with our maintenance and construction projects. This tool will be used to inform the prioritization of projects in our planning phases. As Deputy Director Shishido said, sorry, Robin, I butchered her name. We began transitioning our fleet to electric vehicles from 2021. We're also keeping our youth council engaged throughout touch points, collaborations throughout the year. Next slide, please. More on a reduction strategy example of the Clean Fuel Standard. Our energy security plan relies on transitioning to clean fuels, but faster local production or imports requires financial incentives for low carbon fuels and disincentives for high carbon fuels. We're going to be conducting a feasibility study to evaluate the specific Hawaii Clean Fuel Standard or alternative framework, assessing the potential financial impacts to our community. Next slide. Investing in these listed carbon capture initiatives, by capturing and storing carbon emissions, it also contributes to reduce fire risk, endangered species protection, cleaner air, and more. That QR code that you see on the left-hand side of the bottom takes you to our native planting page where we track our own native planting statewide. To date, we've planted over 4,200 natives. Our website includes interactive maps as well as the types of native plants. And now I would like to introduce Kavika Pegram, Hawaii Youth Transportation Council member. Kavika will share the council's role and insights from a youth council member perspective. Kavika?
Thank you, Deputy Director Lee. I really appreciate being here today to share my perspective with everyone in the meeting. So, officially the Youth Council serves as a working leadership group that advises HDOT on climate mitigation and adaptation commitments and other programs like that. The Youth Council members, what our purpose is really to advise on everything from increasing public electric vehicle charging to improving pedestrian safety to probably most importantly, communicating effectively with youth and the broader community to make sure that this plan has kind of legitimate buy-in. But in my opinion, what the Youth Council really is an opportunity to represent voices from communities that are typically uninvolved in processes like this plan. Of course, the biggest representation the Youth Council provides is young people, but it's also a council full of people with varying degrees of education, of many, many different races and ethnic origins. And so again, while the Youth Council is certainly a youth council, it's really an opportunity to get a lot of voices deeply involved. I mean, the council was formed through the Navahine settlement. And so the council's foundation is in providing that meaningful advice to HDOT. And, we can only do that through our diverse membership. And by ensuring that our membership is diverse, as you can see here on this slide, we can ensure that our contributions and the advice that we're able to give HDOT goes beyond just putting young people in front of a camera. You can see how diverse the council is. I mean, just on this slide, we have people ranging from 7th grade to college graduates, with people from every major island in the state. And, it doesn't say here, but every step really along the socioeconomic ladder. And so if we can go to the next slide. And here's kind of a physical or like a visual representation of that. And so, and because of where we come from and the differences in how we grew up, you can see that a lot of the people on the council have different motivations for having joined. I can tell you that from meetings I've had with these wonderful groups of this wonderful group of folks, I've heard everything from really strong, passionate contempt for climate change to young people who just really want it to be easier to get around. And that shows up, I think, and it reflects itself in kind of the way that we think about the plan. Speaking personally, you know, I joined the youth council because I see transportation really as just kind of next great frontier to the fight against climate change. And you know, we've done so much and have so much more to do on energy, but these fights are battles on multiple fronts, and so we need a multi-layered focus. So I'm grateful that the DOT, you know, entering into the settlement is willing to think critically about how it can reduce its emissions and to involve young people, a diverse group of young people, you know, in really meaningful ways throughout this plan. So thank you. I'm going to pass it back to Deputy Director Lee.
Thank you so much, Kavika, for your perspective and your words. So this is where we are. Like I said, it's not one and done. We want continuous collaboration with our partners and our community. And that's why we're holding these public meetings. We really want to take all of the input to inform our final plan, which will be released on October 15th. We also have a QR code there on the right-hand side, and that'll take you to the plan, the draft plan itself, and also a comment card. So please leave comments. And again, thank you so much for spending time with us this evening. We really wanted to end on time so that we can open it up for questions.
Yes. Hi, I had a quick question, mostly about the timeline. So I saw that the final plan is going to be published on October 15th. I was wondering, does that mean that we're going to put regulations in force the day of on October 15th? Does this go back to the Navahine youth for their input? For example, like the limits on cruise ship visits to the ports, are we going to establish a cap on how many visits to the ports are allowed to happen starting October 15th, or is that something that's going to be implemented at a later date?
Jerry, maybe I can answer the general question and then pass over to you. Yeah, thank you so much for your questions, all very relevant, I'm sure, to multiple people who are listening. No, like on October 15th, there's not a dramatic change. There are many strategies in the plan, which will, and so really they're going to be bucketed in our final plan to note which are our short-term strategies, which are our medium-term strategies, and which are really exploratory strategies that have been, maybe they've worked in other places, but we want to do more exploration before actually implementing them in Hawaii. And so this plan is very long ranging, right? The state's existing emissions reduction targets take us through 2045. And so we've included in the plan all of the strategies to reduce emissions that we think may be needed during that long time, 20 years or more time to reach those targets. So there's not going to be an overnight switch, but there are already actually ongoing some immediate investments, like Deputy Shishido talked about the 5-year priority multimodal network and the investments that will be happening right away. So I don't want to, I don't want anyone to fear that it'll be night and day from now to October, before and after October 15th. Some of the strategies rely on legislation. And Deputy Lee talked about proposing a clean transportation legislative package for next session that, again, the public will have the opportunity to weigh in on both now and at that time as well. And I'll turn it over to Deputy Director Khalili.
Thank you, Laura. I think speaking to your specific question on the cruise, first of all, I think we're waiting for feedback from various cruise industry stakeholders through this comment period, and we'll see what those comments are and whether we'll need to make adjustments to the plan based on the comments. But we also understand how the cruise industry works in terms of selling itineraries like 2 and 3 years in advance. So we understand that, you know, some lines may have passengers already booked for itineraries through maybe 2027. And so we, should the strategies that we outlined this evening remain in the plan, we understand that we're going to have to, over time, do a lot more outreach and communication as to how we're going to implement the strategies to reach the targets by those 5, 10, and 15-year time frames.
Yes, I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. And please feel free to unmute and come onto camera and share any questions you have or any comments that you want to share with the group and with Hawaii Department of Transportation.
Hi,
Go
can you
ahead.
hear me? Hi, I'm Renee Limoges-Reeve, and I just wanted to thank Deputy Director Kalili for those comments. I'm with Cruise Lines International Association, and our member cruise lines are working on our comments and appreciate the opportunity to respond to the draft plan. We really appreciate these presentations. They've been helpful, they've been educational, and we look forward to the ongoing dialogue as Hawaii works toward works toward these goals. So thank you. It's not really a question. It was more of a thank you for doing this for us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Renee. Clint, go ahead, and then we have a comment in the chat that I can invite the commenter to share it after you, Clint. Thanks.
Hi there, Clint Churchill with the Practical Policy Institute. I think first off, I don't know how you read it into the record, but I thought Mike Hansen did a very good job of recapping the situation and raising a lot of concerns that at least I didn't see in the plan itself. So in the form of adding testimony, I think that should be added. The 2 points I'd like to make pertain to cost primarily, and also source of energy and what this whole plan is dependent on. So let's touch on cost briefly. I don't want to take too much time here. Obviously, the plan is aware that cost is going to be an issue. The only criteria that I saw in the whole thing is that I'll read the words here, that the increase in cost for all of this shall not be so economically extreme that makes Hawaii unaffordable. We're starting with a base of Hawaii already is unaffordable. We all know cost of housing, #1 in the country. Cost of electricity, #1 in the country. Cost of transportation, certainly in the top 10%. So we're starting with that base. So what is the criteria short of extreme where either we have to go back to the legislature, go back to the judge to seek relief on this, or our residents? I think the standard of too extreme doesn't really set much of a plan at all. If the cost is significantly higher for everybody, is that okay? I don't know, but maybe there should be some criteria. I won't say more on the cost, but that's obviously the elephant in the room with all of this. And I think I didn't see much of any cost estimate in the plan. I think that needs to be a big priority between now and your October date of finishing this up. Number 2 is kind of the conversion from gallons to kilowatts. This whole plan rides on, from the executive summary, will require modernization and successful transition to renewable energy by the energy sector. Well, there's a problem. Neighbor Island should be fine. We've written a fair bit, even in this morning's paper, about the problem on Oahu. If you defend 100% renewable for Oahu, you have to defend 15,000 acres for utility solar farms. you have to defend 21% of our power coming from floating windmills. This is the preferred plan from HECO that was derived after 3 or 4 years of hearings. You have to defend 10% of our power coming from some form of biofuel. It costs at least twice as much, if not 3 times as much. You have to defend more windmills, 5% more power from windmills. The rural communities, especially Kahuku, just aren't going to put up with that. So I think that the big thing that's missing here is, okay, it's almost a chart. How many gallons are consumed by the transportation sector, and how many kilowatt hours then will the transportation sector have to draw from the energy sector? It's going to be a huge increase of demand for the energy sector. And on Oahu, we don't have the land to do that with solar farms. And the pushback from the community on floating windmills, pushback on shore windmills will be great. So this whole thing is, to me, built on a very tenuous house of cards of the power source to convert from gallons to kilowatts. So those are the two things that at least jumped out to me as I reviewed this in the last few weeks. I'd be glad to answer any questions, especially about the situation of energy source on Oahu.
Thank you very much, Clint, for your comments. And we did note the article and your comments about cost and your comments about the transition to electrification. And I guess I will just note, you're correct, right? The Hawaii, we absolutely acknowledge that we have some of the highest cost of living. There are studies about the high cost of transportation with our existing transportation system. And that's why we've made affordability one of our 3 pillars of our plan. So this plan is very inclusive of strategies that have worked locally or elsewhere to reduce emissions. However, we're not going to be advocating for implementation of a particular strategy until we better understand the economic impacts of that strategy. So the clean fuel standard, just for example, that Deputy Director Lee mentioned earlier, we are going to be doing a feasibility study on that clean fuel standard. Although it may be working in other places, we want to understand the impact to the average resident and the struggling resident before we advocate for a change in law to support that. So we really are, I guess, trying to have a plan that shows a roadmap to to compliance with our existing state law, but that also allows us to investigate the economic impacts before implementation. So we really appreciate your comments. Thank you. There is a comment in chat from Mark Napier. Mark, feel free to unmute and share your comment with the group if you'd like. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Welcome to, thank you very much for this meeting. No, just reading through all 205 pages of the proposal, and I just feel there should be an emphasis on employment first as a strategy for meeting clean air and carbon neutral goals. And you know, what documentation do you have that discusses how many people are actually employed on a weekly or daily or yearly basis, directly and indirectly in the cruise ships? I know there was a lobbying organization that mentioned something like $65 million in lost revenue if you eliminate cruise ships. So I think the focus really needs to be on toting up employment impacts on this industry in particular, because I work in the cruise industry, and as any industry in general. And in answer to Clint's question about not having the land for solar power, we have plenty of land. They're called freeways and warehouses. Cover the freeways with solar panels, you've got plenty of land. Don't put solar panels on land. That's for food. And I'll sign off now. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mark, for your comments. Would anyone else like to offer a comment or a question? Curtis, please go ahead.
Hi, oh, sorry. I was trying to get my video to work. Thank you again to the Department of Transportation for hosting this meeting and for us allowing those of us to voice our opinions. A lot, like Mark has said, many are concerned about jobs, but I just want to say also this, thank you to the department for allowing us to voice our concerns, and we look forward to hearing how the conversations are going to help the plan. And we hope that there will be a positive for all sides as we move forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Curtis. Anyone else? Yes, go ahead, Clint.
Can I speak one more time?
Absolutely.
This might be a help for my point about the level of kilowatts, megawatts, and gigawatts that will be required to do this. There was a study by the state energy office, kind of in response to their draft plan. The study was done by 3E, and it starts out with the HECO IGP projected demand, as I recall, for Oahu come 2045, 8,000 gigawatt hours. That study thinks that estimate projection by HECO is grossly understated by as much as 50%. So I think you commented earlier about the different departments have to integrate. I would suggest getting your hands on that study because that exacerbates, and I think a lot of what they were anticipating is progress in the transportation sector, but nowhere near to this extent. So the energy demand on Oahu is the huge problem, both for electricity and for transportation.
Thank you, Clint. Yes, we are familiar with that study from the Hawaii State Energy Office, so thank you for bringing it up. And the State Energy Office has provided us with very helpful feedback and has been heavily engaged. So we'll be integrating their feedback into the plan as well. And I guess I would just note, we have multiple state laws, right, that us as a state agency are trying to be in compliance with, and I know the public utilities are working to be in compliance with as well. The Renewable Portfolio Standard being one of those laws. But yeah, your point's well taken, and we can check if we've cited to that particular report in our plan and integrate the feedback from Hawaii State Energy Office into our final plan.
Well, I was very impressed with the quality of the 3E report. I think they're based in San Francisco, and I would encourage. They've been spun up. They understand the state now. They understand the challenge. To the extent that DOT has any funds for, advice from yet again another consultant, I think they would be a good one.
Thank you, Clint. Yeah, we really appreciate everyone's feedback and just noting, we have recorded and we have note takers, and so we're taking everyone's comments and questions very seriously. Is there anyone else with a comment or question? If not, we'll be able to give you folks your dinner time back. And we know you didn't have to be with us tonight. You could have been doing many other things. And we just really appreciate your time. And for those of you who have read a portion or all of our plan, thank you for that time as well. We really appreciate your involvement, and it'll make our plan a much more comprehensive document. So thank you very much. Any last words, Tammy?
Yep, no, I just echo what Laura said, and just thank you so much again for spending your evening with the thoughtful comments, thoughtful questions. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.